Good afternoon, Facebook. I'm Sagar and Jetty here with my co-host Amber Athey. This is Today in Media, where we take the 5 most foolish takes from the day and we break it down for you. Now, obviously, there has been a horrific terrorist attack in Lower Manhattan, the deadliest terrorist attack in New York since 9/11. Unfortunately, our media has lost its mind in covering this attack, and it's not bringing you accurate coverage. We're going to kick off today by looking at Nick Kristof, who's a columnist for the New York Times, in which he said, what did he say, Amber?
He said that this attack would have been a lot deadlier if guns were involved, and that it's a good thing that New York City has strict gun laws so that the terrorist was not able to buy a gun. Never mind the fact that we have no idea if he even tried to buy one.
Yeah, this is just pure rank speculation on Nick Kristof's part, and it's irresponsible because let's break down the actual facts here, right? So the perpetrator, Sayfullo Saipov, lived in Paterson, New Jersey. No reference to New Jersey's gun laws there. He had been stopped by Philadelphia or Pennsylvania police on 2 different occasions. So we know that he frequently traveled in and out of the state. He had different points, lived in Ohio and Florida, which actually have very different gun laws. So Nick, spare us the gun control debate, man. Maybe let's talk about immigration, and that's something that we're certainly going to get to. So let's look next at the Associated Press. So the Associated Press, the morning after the attack, was still wondering about the motive. Why is that insane?
Well, it's insane, first of all, because literally every other media outlet and the New York police have identified that the motive was pretty clear from this guy yelling Allahu Akbar while he was killing people, and also by the fact that he left a note in his truck that indicated he was inspired by ISIS. And even worse, in the AP's video, which they put in their little tweet, they mentioned the note, but didn't say what was on it. They just said the police found a note. So not only are they wondering...
What kind of note? A suicide note?
They had
what
no
was
idea.
in the note?
They didn't even say.
A declaration of allegiance to the Islamic State. It's like, what I don't understand here is like the deliberate obfuscation of the motive. It's pretty clear what happened. This is a radical Islamic terrorist attack of a guy who left a note clearly spelling out his allegiance, literally a drawing of the ISIS flag, and we're still here pondering what is the motive of all of this. Anyway, all right, we'll get riled up about this one. We're going to go now to our third segment. Amber, tell us what's happening.
Yes, MSNBC's Malcolm Nance, who is a terror analyst, this is a guy who's considered an expert on terrorism, had this to say about the attacker.
ISIS had one of the largest number of Uzbek populations in Salafist terrorism in South Asia and the Middle East, even in Syria. But until we do get real hard intelligence on this individual, these are a little preemptive. And, I know that's going to be tied into politics and immigration at some point, but, the guy has been here since 2010. We saw the same problem that happened with the Tsarnaev brothers in Boston. These people self-radicalize, and it could have been an American who was formerly Catholic 2 weeks ago, just as easily as it was a person from South Asia.
Wow. A radical Catholic, huh?
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept you got there, Malcolm. Amber, why is that stupid?
Well, I'm a Catholic myself, and I can't say that I've ever met someone who was a former Catholic that then went on 2 weeks later to become a terrorist. Basically, Nance pulled this out of thin air to diminish the fact that this was a terrorist who was motivated by radical Islamic ideology, and instead is trying to make it sound like an American Catholic is just as likely to commit a terror attack. That's blatantly false and irresponsible for him to be promoting that, just blatant mistruth to his viewers.
That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. There is a deliberate cover-up happening here for the Islamic community here in the United States in order not to grapple with the actual facts. The facts are Mr. Saipov came to this country in 2010 under a diversity lottery, even though he had no skills, did not speak any English, and from his entire time here, it seems that he was not able to hold down a job. In the last 4 years, he's grown the beard of a devout Muslim and has been increasingly involved, according to his friends, in radical ideology. That's not a pattern that you generally see amongst a Catholic immigrant. You know what I mean here? And it's just, I think it's just the absolute, it's just dishonesty. And it's dishonesty towards a narrative that they are trying to produce about so-called equality of evil amongst all. And that's just not the case.
It's this rank, just political correctness.
Right.
that President Donald Trump has been railing against, and a lot of the country has signed on to, because they recognize that it's actually good policy to identify the motivations behind an attack and not try to blame it on another group or say that it's just as likely to happen somewhere else. It's about looking at the facts and staring the facts straight in the face and not being able to say that this is a radical Islamic terrorist attack. It's not that difficult. And to try to, make someone feel better about that is just going to lead to more dangerous situations in the future, because you're not able to combat the actual threat.
Absolutely. So let's move on next. And this is from MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle. So she should have a tweet up on your screen in which her first real fear, and then I saw this across the entire media, the first fear was about backlash attacks against the Muslim community here in the United States. Obviously, that's disgusting. It absolutely should not be happening. If it is, they should be prosecuted. The perpetrators should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But they are not the victims here. The victims are the 8 people lying dead on a Manhattan street, and nobody wants to speak for them. Instead, we're apologizing already for the perpetrator of this attack.
Well, not to mention the fact that these people on MSNBC and CNN like to say that Islamophobia is, expressing the desire for stricter immigration laws, or saying that people who come to this country probably shouldn't have ties to radical terror groups. And in this case, this guy, as Trump said in his press conference earlier, was listed as a contact for several people who are associated, dozens of people who are associated with terror groups. So for them to say that it's Islamophobic to question the motivations behind these deadly attacks, that's not Islamophobic. That's rational.
The worry after something like this is not Islamophobia. It's about whether I can walk down the street with my wife, with my girlfriend, whoever, and not get hit by a car. But this is such a simple and clear-cut issue, and yet somehow our elite media have so much trouble accepting this fact.
I would just
sorry, go on.
Going off of that point, I think most people are more worried about whether or not they're going to die than whether or not they're hurting someone else's feelings.
I know. I used to live in New York City. I walked down that bike path all the time, with my girlfriend at the time. I have fond memories, and when I look at those images from there, I'm not thinking about Islamophobia. I'm not worried about the backlash against something. I'm thinking, can I go back to that spot? So next, we're going to the New York Times. This is the most egregious error, and it feeds into the core idea of today's program, which is that this is apologism, rank throughout the entire media. The New York Times gave a push notification to its viewers after this attack in which it described the attacker shouting, "God is great." Because their excuse here is that they were translating the fact that he screamed Allahu Akbar after he rammed, over 20 people on this New York street. Why is that insane?
Well, as if people in the United States aren't going to know what Allahu Akbar means when they've heard it in terrorist attacks across the world over the past decade. It's just ridiculous. And the AP style book says very explicitly that you only translate foreign phrases into English when you think the readers won't know what it means. So they're going against their own style book here in an effort to obfuscate the thing that this guy actually said during the attack.
We don't need anybody to translate it for us, because unfortunately, the moment those words are said, every American, coast to coast, the middle of the heartland, we know exactly what is happening here. And once again, this is political correctness rife through the media in order to apologize and obfuscate what the true motive here is, which is, again, radical Islamic terrorism. I don't know why it is so difficult the person who wrote that in a push notification probably lives in New York City.
Gosh, we've said radical Islamic terrorism at least a dozen times in this show, and this show is less than 10 minutes long, and these people can't say it once? Just once?
It's utter insanity. I want everybody who's watching this to keep in mind what we're talking about here whenever they see what the mainstream media is telling you about this terrorist attack, and look for the real facts. Let's look for the fact that this guy was brought in on a visa program which encourages immigration from countries that are not well represented here in the United States. And that sometimes that those people who get legal permanent residency in this country don't speak any English, have no skills, and maybe we should start asking the question, what are they doing here in the first place? But you're not going to hear that out there. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sagar Enjeti, my co-host Amber Athey, in Today in Media for the Daily Caller News Foundation.